Hey everyone, welcome to the In the Frame podcast. I'm Luke. I'm joined today by Pip, as always, and our lovely guest today is...
Hi, I'm Deborah. I am a independent producer and a line producer, starting off, in short films, progressing into documentaries, factual, short film, short form, and feature length and TV series now.
Incredible. It's lovely to have you on the show. How have you been recently?
Exhausted. Busy. We just it's been quite a tough year in terms of productions. I've been lucky. I've been pretty much working and getting projects completed and shot safely. But yeah, it's been tough, obviously working under the conditions we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, I'm really Debbie, we've known one another a long time, and I know you are, not only are you busy, but you're an incredibly professional person. So I know you would have been like really on it, and I know that because you have been working, and we'll chat about that in a minute. You had to have done a huge amount of work in just ensuring that the productions are COVID secure and stuff. So I know that the last kind of really big project that you were working on was Small Axe with Sir Steve McQueens, which is just fantastic. You know, what a project to be working on, but to be doing that in the midst of the pandemic, just tell us a little bit about that project and the work you were doing on it.
So actually, luckily, we did finish the Small Axe films before the pandemic became the pandemic. I suppose it was probably around, but I don't think we were aware of it. But in terms of the Small Axe anthology, I did 2 of those films up in the West Midlands, Red, White and Blue and Education. And it was a series. It's not really a series. They're 5 single films, all centered around some true stories, and mainly to do with the characters that came out of a certain period, and obviously centered around the West Indian community. So it was shot pretty much in 3 blocks, I guess, over probably about 16 weeks with a couple of breaks in between, mostly in London, and for 3 of them, and then, like I said, 2 up in the West Midlands.
And what were you doing on them?
So I was the line producer of the 2 that we shot in the West Midlands.
And just tell us, for some people, they might not understand what that is. Tell us what a line producer does.
So essentially, you would get the script, you'd read the script, you'd break the script down into the various elements, mostly what's going to cost money, logistics, schedule. You look at the day out of days, that gives you the amount of the days that cast will be working. And basically you try to logistically put the shoot together from a budgeting point of view and a scheduling point of view. So you basically put your budget based on the schedule, but also the elements within the script, from stunts to special items, big cranes, or the Small Axe, like Benediction we've just finished, were both big period films, and there's an element of guesstimate in there as well, because obviously I don't know how much period costumes always cost to hire, and or the amount of dressing that's required compared to a contemporary film. So there's a lot of different elements to consider when you're working on those types of projects.
And so, and obviously you're saying all of the filming was done, but I think you were having to do pickups, weren't you, during COVID? So you were right at the sharp end of having to work out what was COVID secure for that sort of activity.
Yeah, so I didn't actually do the pickups on Small Axe because I was already in prep pretty much on Benediction. So, but the same scenario applies. Yeah, we really had to try, and because we were one of the first productions who'd started, really, so we had to figure out what filming meant in those conditions, and it was difficult, really, because ultimately we didn't have a blueprint, and there was nobody to ask, you know, what was the good practice and what worked and what didn't work. So in a way, I suppose we made it up as we went along based on solid knowledge and research and all of that. So we were able to kind of put together, you know, the protocols, and obviously all doing the different training that was required of us, the screen skills free training for everyone, and that was mandatory for all cast and crew. Obviously for HLDs, you know, some of us had the COVID the COVID training through first option, which was also required. Risk assessments from heads of department became a little bit more detailed and probably taken a bit more seriously than they have been of late. So we were able to put together, you know, a really sensible approach, but obviously without hindering production as well, because I think there's a fine balance between being able to put together a safe shoot, but also deliver a shoot in a way that we're all used to, compared to, you know, it becoming, you know, where you know, we can't do this, or we have to do this because of COVID. We have to deliver a film, but we have to do it in a COVID safe way. So I think there's some sensibilities that we applied that really worked for us.
Now,
Recently been on
sorry, I know Luke's got a question, but just very quickly, because people might not know, just tell us a little bit about Benediction, the film that you were working on after Small Axe.
Oh, so Benediction was directed by Terence Davies. It was again a period film based on the life and works of Siegfried Sassoon, played by Jack Lowden and Peter Capaldi. So they played the same character, just a younger and older version. And it just tells the life of the war poet and I guess the war hero, if you want to call him that. And we had some amazing locations. Obviously, it wasn't the easiest film to shoot under the COVID, you know, banner, because it was, you know, quite a large cast, and there was a few large crowd scenes, you know, with period costume, and we had a lot of, you know, things that kind of came out that we weren't really prepared for, actually. Just simple things like access to costume houses. It was quite limited in terms of their personnel, their time and their opening hours, because of the restrictions, which we didn't anticipate in prep. And it's only these things, you know, until you start going, that they're not really apparent. You can plan for everything on the shoot, but it's that prep. It's just sometimes, you know, it threw up a few things. Access to camera, you know, you couldn't have your full team go and prep the camera kit, for example, and it was really difficult to get into Pinewood, and at one point I thought, oh, we're going to struggle to get our camera kit out of Pinewood, just because of the restrictions they put on. Note to self: do your research before you start hiring kit off people.
Yeah, I've recently been doing been getting a little extra work as while being an extra or supporting artist on a few BBC Casualty episodes, and I've been really impressed with how they've taken the COVID rules and kind of made sure everything. They have a guy whose job is it just to carry a 2-meter stick to make sure everyone is properly socially distanced, or the chairs are socially distanced from each other. And it was really fascinating how they've been, how the production scale of it has changed, and how the kind of space requirements have been changed. We were doing a episode where we were in a cafe, and we went to one of those museum cafes that were massive, and to the point where the entire crew could be in the cafe and just kind of working away in a socially distanced manner. And I was just thinking, as a young filmmaker who's still learning on things, I've always found producing and getting the production going always be one of the most trickiest parts, and one of those things that I am very much not skilled in any way, shape or form. And
don't worry about that.
Yeah, and so I was just wondering, what is some really good practices, and what are some really good tips you'd give to kind of getting that production and getting productions going and producing correctly, and just taking those really good steps to ensure a good set?
Although I think there's a few questions in there. If it's about getting projects off the ground, and in terms of producing and developing you know, projects that go into production. Obviously, you know, I mean, Pip and I have been there many times with many different projects, and none of them necessarily have seen the light of day. So you know, I think, you know, just first of all learning to be tenacious, and learning actually, you know, you have to be in it for the long haul. Nothing's going to happen quickly, and you know, deciding quite early on if you can have a long relationship with the people, the creative team around you, because, you know, you could be having to work with them for 10 years. Can you actually work with them for 10 years without, you know, falling out, or you know, or coming to disagreements? I mean, creative disagreements will always happen, but, you know, you have to be really think about the people that you work with and surround yourself with. I think that's really important. In terms of producing, I think obviously subject matter and scripts are king, and as are the talent that you work with. So developing relationships around, you know, your writing or directing talent early on in everyone's career is great to get that sort of relationship and bond as soon as possible with some key creative people. In terms of independent producing, I think the landscape's really changed, particularly in the last, you know, sort of 12 months now with COVID. And not that we want to keep talking about it, but the reality is it's here and we have to deal with it. And as small independent producers, it's going to impact us massively. You know, festivals are not happening, screening, you know, you can't go to the cinema, you can't do your usual, you know, pop-up events and screenings and all that sort of thing. So ultimately it's going to have a massive impact on us, you know, in terms of our development, the projects, and you know, your income, I guess. So I think there's some things to be thought about around that. That's if you can be lucky enough to earn from producing, I guess, in the first place. But then also, I think in terms of, I think your second part of your question was about how you create those sets with COVID and the setups and stuff like that. I think for that, I think, you know, we had a COVID supervisor who was Jim Mooney. He is a scientist in his background, but the benefit is he also runs Emu Films, and so he has a production background. So he brought the sensibilities together of the science and the production awareness, and I think, you know, very successfully put the protocols in place. I mean, we certainly didn't have anybody walking around with holding a stick saying 2 meters apart. I think that wouldn't be for me a good use of resources, but we had a really solid testing regime in place. We had our protocols, so hand washing, masks, and you know, the reminders there for people to keep a distance. We set it up, you know, in terms of the unit. It was set up in a safe way, and we had those kind of conversations where, you know, how can we set this up safely? How can we turn it around quickly? We had fogging and you know, the machines that made spaces and equipment and things safe very quickly to use, and we had a team of locations assistants and cleaners, you know, constantly making sure high touch areas were clean. And you know, the rest really, you know, we did as much as we needed to do to make it safe, but as little as possible to impact any kind of part of the production, really. Obviously everything we did was as safe as we could make it. There was no corners cut, but you still have to make, you know, you still have to function. You know, a camera team still needs to be on set. We still need cast. We still need a director. You know, you still need hair, makeup, costume. You still need sound. There's a lot of things you can't take them out of the equation. So you have to develop ways in which you can work with them. And obviously the use of PPE, rotating people to dress the set rather than having everyone at the same time, not allowing everyone to rush in when you say cut and they all want to do the checks, which is so unnecessary most of the time, but it's become a habit, I think. But and oddly, I think we actually sped up a little bit because of that. So we made our days, had lots of early finishes, and yeah, everyone was happy and safe.
Incredible. Yeah. What do you think some mistakes people make early on when they're becoming an emerging filmmaker?
Probably being too ambitious, I would say. In that's not to lack ambition, but being too ambitious with your first. There's a lot of people who might expect to be able to raise £10 million for their first production. I think it's just managing those expectations. I think the biggest thing for me is trying to be over enthusiastic as well, and speak to people too soon without having a real solid pack together, and understanding your audience and what you're asking of people. I think that's really important for people to know, because in our enthusiasm we can often be too kind of eager to get out there and speak to people, when actually we're probably another 6 months away from being ready to really be able to put the project forward.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I mean, because you've been doing this for a very long time, and like you said, we've tried to put projects together ourselves in the past and spent sometimes years developing things that don't happen. And I suppose that whole having to live with the reality that you're going to get more no's than you are going to get yeses is just something you have to learn to roll with, really. But a couple of things. One is, like, maybe in terms of when a lot of the people that we're trying to help develop and stuff are often putting together their first films. Some of them are having to do multiple roles, which is just inevitable when you're starting out. But in terms of actually when you're kind of in prep, because that's a lot of what you do, or you do all the whole life cycle, but particularly I think that's where one of your massive strengths is in that prep, really getting something together. What would be some top tips for emerging filmmakers as they're trying to get their project to a point where they're about to go, ready to go and shoot, sort of thing? What are some of the real principles of prep that you think people should take on board?
For me, prep is my most crucial time, really. I mean, by the time you've come to the shoot, you're just firefighting little moments if things go wrong, or you're just managing the things that you've put in place in your prep. And so, assuming you've obviously got your finance sorted, you've done your casting and all of that, and you're good to go and you're green lit. The really strong thing, the things for me that to take away would be that you really need to think about your crew, getting the right heads of departments in place, make a real difference, particularly if you're working with a particular genre or a certain budget level. Is really just think about that creative team, because they will be your friend or foe depending on you wouldn't want to bring someone in on a big period drama who've never done any period before, for example. So it's really doing your research when you're building your team. That's crucial. In terms of prep from a production point of view, it's just really being able to really have confidence in the fact that you've put the money in the right places as well. And you're never always going to know that fully until you've got your quotes in and you've done your deals. But really making the effort to understand, if you need a crane, why you need it, really trying to understand those creative decisions where you might have to say yes, or you might have to say no, we can't afford it. But being able to, genuinely, put an argument forward as to why you're saying no, or being able to offer up a different, scenarios or different suggestions. And it's about having that rapport as well, again, with your HODs and your team. But in terms of basic, I say basic, I think people really underestimate the production office and the value of the production team, because we're the heartbeat really of any production, people wouldn't know where to go if we didn't tell them where to go. They wouldn't have that equipment if we didn't book it and have it, turn up for them. They wouldn't eat probably if we didn't get their food sorted for them. So, I think production is a very, very important integral part of the team. And, there can be a mentality of the shoot crew are the kings and, everyone else is the poor second cousin. I don't like that attitude. I think, we all have a purpose, from the runners to the unit drivers to the transport captain to the cleaners. I mean, our cleaners now have become, a vital part of that team. So, it's trying to create that ethos as well within everyone. And, I think that's really important. But also, making sure communications, making sure, you work with the heads of department for fitting costumes and hair, making sure that they're booked in, making sure, you're speaking to the second AD, if he's already, or she, if there's crowd, are they being sourced? It's not just about the cast, but there's all the additional levels as well. Obviously, you have to get all your accounts and your schedule and all of that in place as well, so we all know what we're working to. So it's also about putting together the logistics. So are there going to be unit bases? How are we going to service the production? It's not just about the shoot itself, the set, but it's everything that goes around it. Do you need trucks? Do you need transport? How many vehicles do you need? Where are people going to eat? How many people are going to eat? And all of that. So there's a lot of logistical thinking to be managed in prep. And for me, we're booking cameras, we're booking lighting, we're booking grip equipment, we are booking trucks, we're booking caterers, we are sourcing quotes from drone operators to special effects to medics, all sorts of things. They're there for you to have to be being put in place, and it's down to production and that planning to know when we need things. If you're working with children, for example, you need to know that you need licensing and child licensing, and you can't do that in 24 hours. You need to factor that into your prep and planning, because that can take up to 6 weeks to do. So there's a lot of things like that need to be considered.
So, all of that stuff is like brilliant. It's all like prep, and you need to make sure you've got the time to do that. And as you and I both know, often when you're scheduling around a bigger film or something, your prep time is, can be as long as your shoot time, sometimes even longer, depending on the complexities. But when people are starting out and they might be trying to get their first short film off the ground, or they're doing, they're a couple of short films in, but they're going to be very limited to budget. They're probably going to be quite limited to actually who they can get involved. And I think you're right. Sometimes they get quite fixated on, it's the cinematographer, the director, whatever. They're not going to be able to have all of the functionality of production the way you've described it and all of those things. So if they're going to have to choose, in a very limited manner, both to do with money and time and all the rest of it, who do you think within the production department are the most important people to have in place, even if you're trying to pull off a real low budget short film or something?
Yeah, two people for me really. Use your first AD, because he's or she's going to be the person that will drive the floor and make sure you make your days and you've got a film to be able to actually cut together. And then a coordinator, I guess, someone who can make sure key items are booked, like hotels, travel, equipment, and be able to liaise with the first AD and pull a call sheet together and circulate a call sheet, get the distribution list so everyone's in the right place at the right time. I think those are the two. If I had to just choose two, obviously it makes a bit more of a more people are required, but two people that are really key are a first AD and a coordinator to work in the production office.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's really good advice, actually. Oh gosh, I mean, we could talk about so much more stuff, because you just got so much experience and knowledge about this stuff. But I think we're probably going to have to draw it to a close. I mean,
if I could ask you one more question,
quick.
And then Pip can ask another question if he wants to. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give yourself if you were to go back to where our audience will be watching is kind of emerging filmmakers, what advice would you give her?
Oh, that's a good question.
We do try. Yeah.
Do you know what? I wouldn't really change anything. I think probably what I said earlier is, I mean, I've got tenacity. I mean, you have to have it. I mean, you know, I didn't arrive at doing all these amazing projects overnight. You know, it's been 20 years in slowly gaining experience, confidence, knowledge, experience, contacts, and all of that. You know, so that none of that comes quickly. So obviously, tenacity is a big thing. But I think the advice I'd give to myself is understand that not everyone's going to see your talent or your skills or your ability or appreciate them unless you can go out there and demonstrate them. So not to be too caught up in or not against going and getting jobs that you might feel that you don't want to do. Like, you know, being a runner, you know, you can gain so much valuable experience. And I think, you know, Pip and I come, you know, from very much an independent producing background, and I think had I have been willing to sacrifice being an independent producer a lot sooner, I probably would have had a lot more credits on my CV and probably got me to being a producer a lot quicker than trying to kind of go out there and build the finance and everything. So I think to think wisely about your career path, but also to remember that credits are king, and IMDb really is where everyone seems to look for crew these days. So, you know, if you're not getting those credits, it will be very difficult to kind of climb the ladder and progress if that's what you want to do. In terms of being an independent filmmaker and trying to get projects off the ground and raise finance, not being too eager to show people too quickly. Make sure you've got patience and get your project right. You know, that they can come back and say they're interested, but we want to do a little bit more work. But it's easy to say no if it's too soon and underdeveloped. And so yeah, so I guess patience is one thing, and also just be mindful about building your credits and your CV and experience.
That's brilliant, Debbie. It was really great advice. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're like mega busy, and I hope you sort out that minor incident that you had earlier.
Yes.
We won't go into.
Spillage on my laptop, and yeah, no, and I'm sure it's fine. Well, apologies if my screen looks dark. I'm not sure why that is, but yeah, I'm sure I can rescue the technology.
But, yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow us on YouTube and Spotify. If you're an emerging filmmaker, go to osbd.com/ITF community and join our amazing group of young emerging filmmakers and creators. And so thank you, Debbie, for coming again.
Thank you very much for having me. Hope it was useful, and yeah, hope it's helped somebody to get on that path and realise their dream.
I'm sure it's certainly.
We're very lucky to do what we do.
We are. Definitely.
Brilliant. Thanks, Debbie.
Right, thanks.
Great to see you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.